One of the most important symbols in the Celtic world was that of the salmon, and it's quite clear from both the archaeological and narrative record that the salmon was held in very high regard. Most notably, we see the salmon in the Welsh and Irish traditions portrayed as a symbol of wisdom and knowledge. There's the story of Culhwch and Olwyn from the Mabinogi, and Culhwch was searching for Mabon, and Mabon was the divine child who was being held prisoner. And to find Mabon, Culhwch had to ask the help of a number of animals, and one of those animals was the salmon of Llyn Lliw. And the salmon of Llyn Lliw was known to be the wisest and most knowledgeable of all the animals, and it was said to be the oldest animal on earth. And then from the Irish tradition we have the story of Finn and Finnegas. And Finnegas was a bard who had spent 7 years searching and trying to find the Salmon of Knowledge. And he managed to catch this fish, and he gave it to his apprentice Finn to cook for him. Now Finn, while attempting to cook the meal, burnt his thumb on the fish, and he immediately put his thumb into his mouth, and in doing so, it was Finn that acquired the knowledge and wisdom of the salmon. And also from the Irish tradition, we're told how the salmon gets its wisdom. And it's said that the salmon gets its wisdom by eating the nuts from the hazel tree. And it's these nuts that contain the wisdom of the world. And when they drop from the trees into the rivers, the salmon, it is said that the salmon come up to eat those nuts. And for every nut that the salmon eats, it gets a new spot. And so the more spots on a salmon, then the more knowledgeable that fish is said to be. And then there's the story of Talisin, where Talisin is transformed to a number of different creatures, including that of the salmon. And I think this story is more about Taliesin's journey to gain enlightenment. Now, if we recall, in pre-Roman times, the culture was primarily shamanistic. And so I see this story as being one that tells us of Taliesin's transformation through the knowledge of animals, and in our case, through the wisdom of the salmon, to reach his status as an adept. So we can see from the narrative record that the Celts truly had a special place for the salmon within their culture. But we've looked at the narrative record. Is there anything in the archaeological record to back this up? Well, there is. It so happens that salmon appear rather a lot in the archaeological record. There are reliefs and statues and carvings on altars that depict the salmon as being a creature of knowledge and wisdom. For instance, there's a relief in Gaul where there's a human head surrounded and framed by two large salmon. And there is another carving on an altar that shows a salmon whispering into the ear of a human head. And then we see Nordens, the god Nordens, being associated with salmon, and we see this in his shrine at Lydney Park on the Severn River. So in short, we just see too much representation of the salmon to believe that this is just coincidence. The salmon clearly held a place in Celtic society. Now the question is, why would the salmon be held in such high regard? Well, you can see that the salmon coming up the rivers to spawn, jumping, swimming against the stream and jumping over all sorts of obstacles just to get back to the river of their birth, would have inspired awe within the Celtic people. But apart from that, to them, this fish would have seemed otherworldly because of its ability to live in both salt and fresh water. So from their perspective, this was a creature that could live in two different worlds. The world of the salt water and the world of the fresh water. Very similar to their belief of two worlds, the world of the living and the other world, the spirit world. And of course, it was the shaman who travelled between the two worlds, the world of the living and the spirit world. And so this fish represented transformation, and it was an animal that was venerated for its ability to do the same things as a shaman. It could move between the different worlds, and so this made it a symbol of transformation. But to top everything else, the salmon, when it had finished its cycle and it had managed to get back to the river of its birth and get past all these obstacles and swim upstream and spawn, then it would die. And it would die and it would be washed up against the river banks, and other animals would come and eat the salmon, and so the salmon became a source of food for other animals and a source of nutrition for all living things. And so this was seen as a symbol of regeneration, and the concept of life, death and rebirth or regeneration was one of the most sacred beliefs to the Celts. And so, just as the serpent is a symbol of regeneration through the serpent's ability to shed its skin and therefore appear to be reborn, then so is the salmon also a symbol of regeneration, where the salmon gives up its life in order to provide nutrition for new life to begin. Then this is seen as a very powerful example of regeneration. And so there we have it, this magical creature that is a symbol of wisdom and knowledge, and is a symbol of transformation, and most importantly of all, is a symbol of life, birth and regeneration. So if you've enjoyed this content and you'd like to see more about the Celts, and in particular the Celtic belief systems, then please consider helping the channel out by subscribing and sharing this video, and give us a thumbs up. And if you do that, that can help the channel to grow, and so we're able to produce more content. So with that, I'll leave you contemplating this magical creature, the salmon. And I'll catch you on the next one.